First You Think is a not-for-profit ministry of the First Unitarian Church of Des Moines. Support us at ucdsm.org today.
Each week we're up here, usually with Reverend Steve, sometimes on our own, but you have probably noticed that along with him is our Celebrant team. And our Celebrant team, we are there primarily to take the themes and Reverend Steve's vision for those themes and add flesh to the bones, I guess, perhaps harmony to the melody. And our meetings are some of my favorite parts of my month. We get to dig deep, laugh a lot, say some outrageous things, and then figure out what we're actually going to say to all of you. I know all of us have the thrill of every once in a while Steve just quoting us straight out, and we're like, I did that. Right? This month, the theme is resistance, as you've probably noticed. And that has meant many things. So early on in the month, when the year had just turned, we talked about sort of bad resistance versus good resistance. Are you being stubborn, or are you resisting something that is wrong? And how we make those decisions. And especially on our second service on January 11th, we talked about the calculus of resistance, how we literally make those decisions. Do we stand up? Do we step back? Somewhere in the middle? And how hard those can be. And especially, I talked about how hard those can be in a context of a family or other emotional structure. Last week, just prior to Martin Luther King Day, we talked about silence and resistance, and specifically how it related to being a Unitarian Universalist. I personally like to get a little kick in the pants about how to be a better you. I don't always know how to do it, but I like that. But I also wanted to share with you, prior to what you're going to have today, a little bit about how the sausage is made. So as a Celebrant team, we take long rambling notes based on a series of prompts from Reverend Steve. And I wanted to share with you some of the things that came up because they've been sticking in my head. Keep in mind, we do this 2 months ahead. So this was us in November, thinking about January. Some of our prompts were like, what is resistance? What do we mean by this word? How do you resist? What's the value of resistance? And I remember Elijah Evans saying that life cannot exist without some form of resistance. We resist gravity. We resist despair. We resist boredom by getting up and doing something. We can also resist in bad ways. Stamping your foot and saying, I'm not gonna, is a perfectly human response to everything, but isn't always helpful. We also talked about how resistance can bring confrontation, and many of us don't like that. We talked about that in that first and second week. You remember Reverend Steve talking about Uncle Dan. We love Uncle Dan, but when he calls the server honey or sweetheart, we have to decide what to do. And we also have to give Uncle Dan the grace to receive our opinion, which is hard. But I liked that take that he did, actually. And so, what is resistance versus stubbornness? And we talked about a lot of different things. And we talked about whether resistance was a spiritual practice. And that brings us to today. Mike Smith was originally going to be here and talk about the fact that he went to jail rather than going to Vietnam. That sounds very simple, but obviously was not. It was a very studied decision he made, and he then had to fight to go to law school after having been in jail. I hope one day we can bring his very fascinating story to you, but unfortunately he was unable to join us today. So what I wanted to give you a shape of what we were thinking about for today, which is our individual choices and our individual emotions about resistance. So our first speaker is the lovely Martha Sherrick-Shen, and she's going to talk to us about resisting fear, hatred, and despair. And then you get to hear the choir.
As she said, I'm Martha Sherrick-Shen, and my pronouns are she, her. My words begin as a desperate query and prayer, and culminate in how love's voice, the voice of wisdom, changes how I listen and respond to the world. It is written in first person, but if it echoes in your own heart, then our voices blend into one voice, a voice crying in the wilderness to make straight the way of justice. So whether you are in the forefront of protests like those in Minneapolis, or like Aaron and Hur holding up Moses' hands so the battle would not be lost, may love sustain you. May love be the answer. Resisting fear, hatred, despair with love. As this chaotic country explodes with hatred and fear, I wonder with eyes clouded by tears how this unknown future will right itself with its ominous twists and turns. How do I see in wisdom's light through the dark hours of this country's plight and keep my mind from filling with utter despair? Let me see through love's prism the colors of grace, breathe in love's breath, and with wisdom embrace all humankind, even those that are blind. Let me use words of conviction to appeal to their soul so they'll listen with love and not to the systems that bind them. Let love break the barrier those systems create and begin to rescue our world before it's too late. Let me stand like the trees through infestations and storms. Let me speak words of warning that spring forth from my roots to signal mycelium through the ground of all being. Let me trust in the power of the atmosphere's breeze with its whims and its ways to send loving messages, warnings, and protection to all the endangered. Let me fruit in their favor. My hope and my prayer is to light up my soul, not to walk with despair, but to see with new eyes the visions of stars in the heavens, a compass, a map, an antiquity guide. Help me be a small light, transforming the night into day. And here is my poem. When I listen to the voice of wisdom, I am learning to listen under the skin of things until only the blood of the matter pulses in my ears. I am learning to hear the silence beneath the noise, even on the busy city streets where anonymity lives. In silence, wisdom speaks. Her words have no voice until they are lived beneath the skin and move through the bones into the heart. Out of the abundance of the heart, life speaks. May it be so.
As part of our pivot, I have a short reading called Both the Burning and the Light, written by Sean Parker Dennison, and he wrote this in February of 2017. About 6 months ago, I got a new tattoo. It's a lit match on my right wrist, added to an arm full of paintbrushes, pens, and other art supplies. As a minister, my tattoos are sometimes controversial, and I was a little nervous about what people would think about this addition. When people asked why I chose a lit match, I'd joke that it was either to burn the world down or to light my inner chalice. These days, the joke is less funny because things have gotten more serious. As the new president signs executive orders that give tax breaks to the most privileged while attacking immigrants, refugees, Muslims, LGBTQ plus people, people with disabilities, and anyone else he disagrees with, I am more and more committed to resistance. This deepened calling to a life of non-compliance will take a lot of burning and a lot of light. As an artist and religious leader, I believe in the necessity of creative destruction. A magnet on my refrigerator says, "Go forth and set the world on fire." For me, it's a statement of passion and a reminder that in order for justice to flourish, injustice must be dismantled. In order for freedom to be real, fences, cells, and walls must be torn down. In order for forests to remain healthy, wildfires must burn away the overgrowth. I am ready to embrace creative destruction as one of the tools we need in these times. But we need more than destruction. We also need to support each other. Lighting the flame of our common chalice, real or symbolic, is a powerful reminder that we cannot sustain ourselves by ourselves. We are not enough individually, and enclaves of like-minded people are not enough. We need each other to share the wisdom of lived experience, to remind each other to keep learning, and to love each other through the inevitable failures and eventual success of our resistance. We need both the burning and the light.
So writing has always been a spiritual practice for me, and I practice that in a variety of ways. And part of that is through UU Writers. And I thought when the month of resistance came up, the first thought I had was, man, I'm going to write some really good poetry this month. And then stuff happened at the beginning of our year with Renee Good and other events. And I was just really sitting with a lot of anger. But I also wanted to practice as a Unitarian Universalist, making sure that I remember to keep love at the center of what I do. And so that's when I wrote this poem, Moving Forward in Love. It is heartbreaking to see hands of love spread covered in red, falling to the hands of guns loaded with ignorance, aimed by fear, bullets of defiance tearing through innocent life. No sense of power should ever be born from terrorism. We live in a time where the oath to protect has become a shadow, where sirens do not soothe and badges no longer promise safety. Our society fears the very ones sworn in to keep us safe. It is hard to feel patriotic when so many of us carry the shame of others, when the flag feels heavier with grief than with pride. I stand beside those who whisper what feels dangerous to say aloud, that the people meant to protect us are the ones we feel we need protecting from. I stand beside those whose lives have been split open by hate, whose grief was delivered violently, without consent, without mercy. And still, I still stand beside those who move forward in love. Because when we let hate blacken our hearts, when bitterness becomes our inheritance, we hand victory to those who trade fear for control. So I urge you, love in the way your heart feels safest to do so. Write letters that refuse silence. Stand in peaceful protest, feet rooted in hope. Send love to those fighting quietly, bleeding invisibly, holding the line with tenderness instead of fist. Grief lives in all of us now, but love is how we carry it forward, not as weakness, but as resistance.